Hey everyone, it's Arianna Walker here. Such a privilege and an honour to be able to share a few thoughts with you this morning. I know things are a little different for us all, and the season is a difficult and challenging one. I don't know whether you are all meeting together, socially distanced of course, with masks on and not being allowed to sing, or whether you're still online. I'm from Bradford, and we found out today that we are going back into full lockdown, no visiting each other in our homes, and it's been almost 7 months I think now of restrictions and constrictions, and I know it's creating in many of our lives a sense of anxiety, maybe for some it's loneliness, and just a sense of disconnect from what we're used to, a disconnect even from our church community, a disconnect from being able to gather together and worship together. I know that for many there's fear about health and finance and all sorts of different challenges going on for many of us. And so today I want to share a few thoughts, some thoughts I've had over the last few weeks and months during this season. And I really believe that though we are locked down and restricted and constricted in many ways, I know that we are not locked out. There is freedom in Him. There is a sense of invitation that though the normal aspects of life may look very different, though there's restrictions on how our activities of outworking our faith look, there is not any restriction on the intimacy that we can experience in Him and with Him. It just looks a little bit different. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about the fact that there is an aspect of God, I believe, and an aspect of our Christianity that we are yet to explore. A few months ago, almost a year ago now actually, I went on a bit of an adventure. I climbed Machu Picchu, and this is one of the challenges of leading an organization, a charity that relies entirely on the generosity of people. I have to do some crazy things. I have to do some challenges to raise funds, and last year I climbed Machu Picchu. It was a 10-day trip. Many days of it actually were on horseback, so hours and hours a day on horseback, and then on foot as well. And it was made more challenging by the fact that I'd ruptured my ACL in a ski accident a few months before. So all in all, it was a pretty challenging trip. There was one particular day though that stands out to me. I had to really dig deep. I'd done about 3 hours already on horseback. My knee was in excruciating pain. And then the guide told us that we were going to get off the horses and we were going to climb about an hour to the top of a ridge because he had something to show us. And I was like, can I just stay here? I know that we've got another 3 hours of riding to do. I really looked at that slope and I thought, there's no way I'm going to get up there. I'm tired. I'm sore. I'm not in the right frame of mind to be able to do this. And he just eyeballed me and said, look, trust me, it's going to be good. It's going to be worth it. And so against my better judgment, I decided to push through, and we scrambled up the rock face. I had to use all my hands and legs and push through pain, push through tiredness, dig deep inside myself to get to the top of this ridge. And when we did, my breath was taken away. I literally have never seen anything as beautiful. There was this mountain lake. We are in the Andes here. We are 15,000 feet up, and hidden over the edge of this ridge was this beautiful turquoise blue lake. The fresh air hit my face. The reflection of the snow-topped mountain in the lake in front of me. I don't even have words to do it justice, but something in my soul just took this breath and just breathed it all in. And the guy said to me, he said, look, we call this the secret lake. Only the people that are prepared to do what you've just done, to push through their barrier, to push through the obstacle, to disregard the difficult terrain and push through anyway, get to see this lake. It's the secret lake. And I felt as he was talking to me, God say something similar to me, pressed upon me. He said, there are aspects of me. There are spaces and places within who I am within me as God, that are held back, that are secret only for those who are prepared to push through, who are prepared to disregard all the challenges of the terrain around them and still be willing to push into me and into aspects of me that are secret and held aside for those who are prepared to do the work. And I want to encourage you today, whatever your terrain looks like, whether you have been held back from community, from connection to those around you, from meeting together in real life, in person, with your support group or with your home group or with your gathered together church. Maybe you are relying on this kind of communication and you feel disconnected even from God. I want to encourage you today that He is not disconnected. You may be locked down, but you are not locked out of who He is. You are not locked out of His presence. You are not locked out of intimacy. You know, He makes a promise to us in Jeremiah 33:3. It says this: "Call to me and I will answer you and tell you great and unsearchable things that you do not know." Do you know there are great and unsearchable things that we do not yet know about God? Aspects of His character, aspects of His provision, aspects of His wisdom and energy, His aspects of His grace and forgiveness and mercy and strength available to us right now, in amongst and amidst the season, if only we would call upon Him, if only we would connect to Him as individuals, dig deep into Him as without all the external stimulus that we may have had before. It's down to, who do you say He is? Who is Jesus to you right now? You know, Jesus asked that question of His disciples in a story in the Bible that I'm going to read out to us, because I think it's a really good question to ask ourselves in the circumstance that we find ourselves in now. And I'm going to read it from Matthew 16. It says this: "Now, when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi," I'm actually going to stop there. I know I've only read one sentence of the story, but in this story, it matters where He is. And I would have read past that line for years and did for years until I went to Caesarea Philippi about 3 years ago on a visit to Israel. And in that place, and we had a guide, a historian, who told us the context of Caesarea Philippi. You see, when we got there, we were presented with this huge rock face with a cave in it. And what I found out was that this rock face, this cliff, was known as the Rock of the Gods. And carved into it, I could still see it, were small temples and shrines to many different gods. But this cave in particular was very, very significant to the generations and the civilizations of the time when Jesus went. You see, there was there at the cave a shrine, a temple built to the Greek god Pan. It's where we get the word panic from, and interestingly, it's the start of the word pandemic. It is the god of the wild, the god of chaos. It's panic. It's a sense of fear and anxiety. There was a shrine built to this god Pan, this god of the wild, of the unknown, of the panic and chaos. And in the worship to this God, so many dreadful atrocities would happen. Child sacrifice, blood sacrifice. And in worship and honor to this false God, so many of humanity were sacrificing themselves. You know, in this cave, there was a spring of water, a well of water that came out. And they did believe that was the birthplace of Pan. That's why they worshipped him there. They also believed that it was an actual entry point into Hades. And in fact, that cave was known as the gates of Hades. Jewish men of the time were not actually allowed to go to Caesarea Philippi. And so it's really significant that Jesus chooses to walk a round trip of about 32 miles out of his way. There's nothing else around that village and town. It's right in the very north of the country. And Jesus decides to guide his 12 disciples into a town, into an area, into a region he is not permitted to go. They weren't permitted to go because the things that were done there, the godlessness, the darkness, the demonic presence and strongholds that were there, Jewish men and rabbis of the time weren't allowed to set foot there. And yet here we have Jesus guiding his young disciples into a restricted zone, area not allowed to be, only to ask him and have this conversation. And suddenly, within the context of that background, I'm very interested in what Jesus has to say to his disciples. And he says this: "Who do people say that the Son of Man is? And they said, some say John the Baptist, and others Elijah, but still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." And so Jesus said to them, "Who do you say that I am?" And Simon Peter answered, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus said to him, "Blessed are you, Simon, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I also say to you that you are Peter. And upon this rock, not the rock of the many gods in which they're standing, no, upon the rock of the revelation of who Christ is, upon that rock, I will build my church, and the gates of Hades, the gates that they are standing right in front of, that they weren't permitted to enter anywhere near, there, right there in the stronghold of darkness, the gates of Hades will not overpower the revelation of who Christ is." Who do they say that he is? You know that someone else's revelation of Christ will not power you through your difficult terrain right now. Someone else's revelation on who they say God is, who they say Jesus is not enough to get you through this season where the external means by which you kept yourself stable, the ways in which you might have relied upon to center yourself have been changed and taken away. We're having to find new ways to connect to him and to each other. And so we can't rely on someone else's revelation. We can't rely on going to church. We have to find a new way of being the church. Who do you say that he is? Who you say that he is in amidst this dark time will make all the difference. You see, I love that Jesus brought his disciples to the very core of the darkness, the very gates of Hades, the very area where darkness had the loudest voice. He asked them right then and there, "Who do you say that I am?" And it was Peter. Peter, who had lots of bad days but had a good day that day. Peter, who spoke for the first time. No other human had ever before said the sentence out loud, "You are the Son of the living God." And I believe when he spoke those words, there was a tremble that went through the darkness, a tremble that went through the demonic forces, a tremble that went through the god Pan and every other god represented there. Panic, fear, chaos, bowed its knee and shook to its core, because who Jesus was being revealed then and there. I believe that when you are in your midst of panic, in your midst of fear, in the midst of a pandemic, who you say Jesus is, who you say he is, who is he to you right now, makes all the difference. It will make the darkness around you shake. It will cause his light to shine. It will cause his identity to be revealed to you in a new way, in a way that was maybe before held back and set aside for you to find right now, wherever you are. You know, it reminds me of a story someone told me about the Napa Valley in California. I have a friend who lives nearby there, and she told me the story that many years ago, when they started putting artificial irrigation into the ground, they started putting pipes just 2 inches under the ground to put water through every vineyard in the area because it would increase the crop. It would mean that there was never a shortage of water, and that the vines didn't need to try too hard to get irrigated and get refreshed and get the water they needed, and the vines would produce much more fruit. And this worked well for many years until there was a drought, until the external circumstance changed and suddenly the water was held back. Suddenly there was a drought, and it went on for year after year after year. And many of the vineyards lost their crop, and many of the vineyards shriveled away, and many of the vineyards failed to thrive when the drought came. But one man was different. One vineyard that was held and had been held for many generations in the family of an old man, and he had refused to put the artificial irrigation down. He had refused to dig the pipes 2 inches from the ground. He believed that the vines should be allowed to do what vines were meant to do, which was grow their roots down deep enough to find their own water. Maybe that's a challenge for us today, to grow our roots down deep enough to find our own water supply, our own connection to Christ in difficult circumstances. It reminds me of the scripture in Jeremiah 17 verse 7. It says this, "But blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. They'll be like a tree planted by the water that sends out its roots by the stream. It does not fear when the heat comes. Its leaves are always green and has no worries in a year of drought, and never fails to bear fruit." Today, my encouragement to us all is to press through, to allow our roots to grow down deep enough into the secret places of God, to find a new level of intimacy, to not be held back by the difficult terrain, by the steep slope, by our weariness, by our fear of a pandemic, whether there is just obstacle after obstacle in the way, whether there's a sense of darkness or disappointment in you right now. Let me encourage you that there is a hope. There is light in your darkness. There is a secret lake, a secret place set aside of refreshment for you in his presence. You may be locked down right now. The circumstances might be trying to restrict you and constrict you, but you are not locked out. Amen.